Meet PlatoWork, a wearable designed to optimize your cognitive performance. Your brain is a network of natural electrical activity. PlatoWork uses a safe and well-known technology called TDCS, which adds small electric current to help you accelerate processes such as learning, focusing, and creative problem solving.
They've currently raised $171,203, and they only had a $22,000 flexible goal that they were asking for this marvelous science. They've only got 14 days left and will probably get funded. With any luck at all, the people that are backing this are going to get the Wonder device. But let's take a look under the hood a little bit, shall we? In looking over the overview, their first question is, do you ever have days where your brain just won't collaborate? Well, this supposedly is the device that will kind of jumpstart your brain and allow you to choose between 4 different modes, as if the human brain is some kind of push-button thing. And those 4 modes, of course, are learn, create, concentrate, and rethink. Okay? They're talking about this as a safe and well-known neurostimulation technology called TDCS. Now, looking at the wall of text that this campaign has, you're going to wonder what TDCS stands for, but you are not going to find out until you're about 3/4 of the way down. So we're just going to jump there now, shall we? Well, like they said before, it's a new product, but it's a known technology. And let's read exactly what they say here, because the exact wording can be important. The headset uses a safe and well-known technology called TDCS, transcranial direct current stimulation, which can increase cognitive functions by sending a weak current through specific regions of the brain. It's been around for more than 20 years, but has been reserved for elite usage in closed settings such as Army and pilot training and research labs at top universities. Now that's really important to note, because those closed settings are laboratory settings where they can set up all the conditions that they need to understand what is happening when they introduce an electrical current into the brain. But they've got another video right here where they're going to talk about this. Let's see what they have to say about it, shall we?
Hi, I'm Morten. I'm a neuroscientist and one of the founders of Plato Science.
And I'm Signe. I'm a research manager here at Plato Science.
And together, we are the science in Plato Science. Besides founding Plato Science, I have spent the last 10 years studying the neuroscience of creativity, primarily using functional MRI. That is, that I've been studying the neural mechanisms that enables the human brain to create at the biological level. So how does an idea first arise in the brain at the unconscious level, and also how does it form into consciousness? I primarily looked at why some people are more creative than others, and perhaps more importantly, how can we apply knowledge from neuroscience to the real world, which is why we created Plato Science. Actually, it was insight from this research that led to the idea that we could use neurostimulation to mimic what the creative brain is doing, and also apply this pattern to other cognitive processes as well.
Like Morten, I'm a neuroscientist. In my research career, I've looked deep inside the brain, trying to understand the cellular mechanisms of how to improve cognition. Looking at one neuron at a time, I have investigated the neuronal changes in parts of your brain that are responsible for memory and for learning.
Just one neuron?
Yeah, at a time, but 1,000 in total.
Plato Science did not invent TDCS. Actually, the technology has been around for a very long time, and direct current stimulation dates back to around the beginning of the 19th century.
However, the modern TDCS we know today wasn't introduced until around 20 years ago. And since then, the research has exploded, and now more than 4,000 studies have been published.
Based on this scientific foundation, what we are trying to do with the Plato work is to take the benefits that's been discovered in the lab and make them available in people's lives.
When we study TDCS, we can see actual changes in neuronal activity. The neurons are simply more active, they fire more. And over time, we can see that the connections between the neurons get stronger, a mechanism that's called synaptic plasticity. Actually, there's evidence that BDNF, a growth factor that facilitates synaptic plasticity, is increased after stimulation with TDCS. We can also measure changes in cognition. In studies where we stimulate the prefrontal cortex, as we do with Plato work, we can see an increase in working memory, faster learning, and better concentrations. But the effects of TDCS on cognitive functions are not the same for all people. And the question is then, does it work for you?
Well, that's just one way to find out. Right now, Plato work is based on what our brains have in common, but all brains are different. That means that even though we can show that our stimulation works for the general population, we cannot predict the kind of effect that you will experience. In fact, we expect that there will be individual differences. But this is exactly what makes this project so unique. When you get your Plato work, you'll need to work with it, to find out how it works best for you, and in what situations, and so on and so forth. It becomes very personal and you just need to try it. Yes, it's absolutely safe. To date, there's more than 30,000 human trials registered, and so far there are no reports of any serious side effects, not one. Mild side effects do occur, although they're few and only experienced by a small number of people. The technology is well tested and we have no reason to believe that it's unsafe, as long as you stay within the safety parameters and of course don't do anything stupid.
When we do a study here at Plato Science, we always make sure that the effects we see from TDCS is not placebo from putting on the headset. We do that by using a sham stimulation as control. Sham is a fake stimulation that makes you feel like you're being stimulated, but the current doesn't affect the brain. And that way, we are certain that the beneficial effects we measure are from TDCS. Your neurons are electrically charged, and the electrical potential in your neurons is important for neuronal signaling. When a neuron sends off a signal, the electrical potential in the neuronal membrane is changed to a threshold that makes it fire. When you put on Plato work, the current changes the electrical potential in your neurons. Underneath the stimulating electrodes, the electrical potential in your neurons are closer to the threshold. That way, TDCS makes it easier for your neurons to fire. Because the current only changes the electrical potential to a sub-threshold level, TDCS does not make your neurons fire. But by making it easier for them to do so, with Plato work you can enhance natural activity.
Now, I have to admit that sounded really, really good. It was very interesting the way that they presented it, and they did so in such a manner that I think they genuinely believe in what they're talking about. But I do also want to highlight a very particular point in that video. Let's take another look at it, shall we?
But the effects of TDCS on cognitive functions are not the same for all people. And the question is then, does it work for you?
Well, that's just one way to find out. Right now, Plato work is based on what our brains have in common, but all brains are different. That means that even though we can show that our stimulation works for the general population, we cannot predict the kind of effect that you will experience. In fact, we expect that there will be individual differences. But this is exactly what makes this project so unique. When you get your Plato work, you'll need to work with it, to find out how it works best for you, and in what situations, and so on and so forth. It becomes very personal and you just need to try it.
Now let's see if you heard the same thing that I heard. They're telling you that you might get their device and you may have a different experience from everyone else with that device. But the only way to find out is if you get the device, spend the money, and then see what happens. This looks an awful lot like they're hedging their bets a little bit, or maybe covering for the idea that if you use this or try to use it, nothing is going to happen for you, which I strongly personally suspect may be exactly what happens. They do talk about the placebo effect. My hat's off to them for being honest about that. I really believe that this is a placebo effect device. As far as I've been able to determine in looking up transcranial direct current stimulation, putting electricity into the brain, the studies that have been made of all of those studies they're talking about, none of them have really reached a conclusion about that it's going to do what they're claiming for the Plato work. If you get this device, and a lot of people apparently are based on the amount of money they raised, you're doing so not only at your own risk of losing that money, but you're really getting into something that for the general public, for all the masses, it really is not proven yet. I found that in crowdfunding, that is where an awful lot of these kinds of things operate. They take a small measure of what has been found in studies, even though no firm conclusions long-term have been made, and run with it. And they want you to run with it as well. But that is your decision to make. It is your money. And as always, I would say use it wisely. The special was at $337. They have brain training at $18. If you have a bunch of friends that all want to sit there and wear these things and stare at each other and think deep thoughts, I guess, it's available too. And of course, if you want to be a Plato pioneer, they're certainly willing to take that 4-figure donation. And remember, it is a donation whenever you give money to a crowdfunding campaign. I'll be watching to see what happens after this campaign is over and they get their money. Let's see what everybody has to say that got one or does get one, and if they actually do have greater creativity, greater thinking, greater mental capacity, whatever you want to call it. But I remember one category that they talked about called rethink. I'd like to find out whether any of those people are now rethinking about whether or not they'll ever crowdfund something again. Meanwhile, I'm holding a cell for them in crowdfunding hell.